Welcome, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, if it's sunny and bright or grey and windy, welcome to Taking the Tradition On. So we will be here for about an hour in conversation, and this is where I talk to storytellers about storytelling, about their traditions, about what inspires them. Occasionally people come expecting a concert to go, when are the stories going to start? Well, there will be stories, but they are the stories behind the story. So the stories of what drives a storyteller, what inspires them, of how that storyteller was made. So that is the purpose of these evenings. We've got lots and lots of very lovely people from far distant Sidmouth and Cumbria and Italy. And hello to Bangor in Northern Ireland and London. It is lovely to have all of you here. And my guest, well, is also from London, but not just from London. She's also from Sri Lanka. And that's one of the things, there's so many of us now. We don't come from just one place. We're made up from so many different parts and places that make these wonderful, unique wholes of the individuals that we are. And the stories come from all of those different traditions as well, which is partly what we're going to be talking about tonight. But my guest tonight is a very special tradition bearer. She is originally from Sri Lanka, and she is a Sathara Karaya, which is a very unique thing to be. She is possibly the only one left. So I think she does have an epic journey coming up when she's finally allowed to return to Sri Lanka to see if there are any others. Because you have to be third generation traditional storyteller, which Debbie Guneratne is. And I'd like to welcome Debbie to Taking the Tradition On. And I'm sure that all of you are going to give her a massive Zoom clap, virtual clap. Go hurrah on the chat for her as we welcome Debbie Guneratne. Good evening, Debbie.
Hello, Amy. That's the English version. I'll now greet you the way we do in Sri Lanka. Aibo1. Aibo1 means hi, hello, welcome, how are you, have a good day, live long, live well, live happily ever after. And in Sri Lanka, we don't shake hands, we put our hands together. We always say this word with a big smile because we like to pretend the sun's shining and the skies are blue. So I don't know if you'd like to try it, but definitely have that smile. And the word is Aibo1. So shall we try it? Aibo1.
Aibo1, Debbie. Aibo1, everybody.
Thank you. So thank you, Amy. As a Sathara Karaya, third generation storyteller, there is always a very special way we start, and we start with thanks. So I'd like to say thank you to Amy for inviting me here today. Thank you to all of you for coming to listen. I hope you're sitting comfortably. I hope you've got We love to tell stories and chat over cups of tea, glasses of water, and any sort of food that you might have. And of course, I'd like to say thank you to all the storytellers that stand behind me in history and beside me, including my father and my grandfather. The three of us make the three generations, and that's why I'm considered a Sathara Karaya. And you might get or have to listen very carefully because I'll skip through their lives and my life because they're all tangled. You see, we say to be a Sathara Karaya, you have to have lived and experienced 3 lifetimes. So I hope I do them honor. And I'd also like to say thank you to my family, because they've made me the storyteller I am. To my father, who taught me how to dream as well as told me stories. To my mother, who taught me how to do the practical things that meant I could achieve my dreams. To my brothers, who were the voices of reason. To my sister-in-laws, who gave me little gifts along the way, lovely musical instruments, bottles of scent. And finally, to my nephews and nieces, because they are the future generation, the next possible storyteller. And as my nephew Christopher said, it's great to have an auntie who gives you the imagination when you're young of dragons and dinosaurs and robots. But what's better is that when you grow up and you see everyone else taking a safe or comfortable career path, it's lovely to look up to someone who's doing something they love. So I thank all my family, extended as well, and welcome you all. The next thing that happens is that you're given a glass of water. So the glass of water says you are welcome. And the moment you drink it, you say, I am accepting the rules of this webinar, Amy.
Well, the main rule is to be kind.
Yes.
Anything else is a bit of a byblow. Be kind.
Okay. So around me, you can see saris and some tokens. An elephant. If you have elephants, they should have their trunk up and they should be facing doors and windows to bring in good luck. The white are temple flowers, which we take to temples. And these are lotus buds, which young girls usually, or young boys, go along the banks of the rivers and pick the lotus buds. And then throughout the day, they unfold petal by petal so that the blossom is full and people can buy them and then take them to whichever temple or church they wish to. Okay, Amy.
What a beautiful space you have created for us. And I love that idea of living 3 lives to be able to tell a storyteller, to be a storyteller. And it's one of those tricky things, because I started storytelling very young, and I think too young, really. And I think you do need a little bit of life experience before you can really tell stories. And yet at the same time, you need a whole lifetime to be able to learn all those stories. But I know when I first started out, one of the great things about being a storyteller, and I used to say to people, so I can still be doing this in 60 years' time. And actually, as a storyteller, you get better and better and more looked up to the older you are. Whereas kind of for women, if you kind of hit a peak about 30, and then kind of in a lot of careers, and hopefully that's changing now. It's not the same for men. For women, kind of at 30, yeah, if you haven't made it to a certain place, it's hard to keep going. But for storytelling, it's an entirely different proposition. And your 3 generations, it was really interesting, because obviously it's your father and your grandfather who are both males, but you are a female. Is there any differentiation between the sexes in that? Is it just any sex?
Absolutely not. It's as my godmother said to me, she said it's something you're born to be. Because when I asked her, like, was she surprised? Because the way you went into storytelling is very different to me, Amy. It was just part of my life. I was immersed in it. Living in Sri Lanka till I was 10, stories just happened, all the time. And when I came to England, it was very different. So, of course, I did kind of the normal expected things, which was to study, to get a good job. And my family obviously supported me in that. And I went through all the things, wanting to be an astronaut, but don't like closed spaces, and wanting to be a pilot, but didn't like heights. And then because my father is or was one of the foremost snake specialists, as well as marine life specialist there, I thought of being a marine biologist, but I couldn't swim. So then I decided to study geology instead. And I loved it, because for me, living on this world is exciting. It's just so incredibly varied. I would really love to spend my life traveling, from place to place. And I was lucky enough to do it. And I can tell you about that in a moment. But it's just that it doesn't matter. And I found out that apparently my great grandma was a brilliant storyteller. So, but she got married, she had kids, and she didn't tell it in the way my grandpa and my dad did, you know. So I think that you can be a storyteller, whatever you do as a job, as well as storytelling. Because for me, storytelling is something innate, something within you, something you want to share. And I just get a whole sense of peace and connection when I'm telling stories. That's very different to doing something like, I love geology, I love climbing volcanoes, you know, that's exciting. And I love seeing gemstones, oh, sparkly things are great. But obviously, I think it took me a long time to realize that this is what I was born to be. But yes, I'm glad I'm now doing what I was born to do.
Well, I think we're all very glad that you're doing what you're born to do, and I'm really pleased that, you know, that's the thing. I mean, I think sadly there's a lot of people who never find that thing that they are born to do, and spend their whole life searching, which is, the search is great, but kind of, you know, we want everybody to be able to find that one thing that they're born to do, don't we? And you definitely have. But I'm just wondering, so to everybody listening, how many of you know anything about Sri Lanka? Because all I know about Sri Lanka, I have to admit, has come from you, Debbie, and it's and I've learned more about it over the last couple of weeks, but I don't know very much at all about Sri Lanka.
Should I?
Everybody's been very quiet. I'm giving them a moment to get typing, get those fingers wiggling.
I'm just putting the chat up so that I can see it too. Yeah.
Just a yes or no. Do you know very much at all? Ah, right. Okay. So Sal's been
Sal,
to Sri Lanka, so she probably knows quite a lot about it. So I could be wrong. I'm imagining that people don't know very much about Sri Lanka. So, but I'm also imagining that the storytelling in Sri Lanka is quite different from storytelling in Britain. So what is it that characterizes storytelling in Sri Lanka? What's the feel and the rhythm of it?
Okay, so do you want a little bit about Sri Lanka first and then go into that, or?
Yeah, just a little picture.
Okay, Sri Lanka is known as the pearl of the Indian Ocean because it's a beautiful teardrop shape, and we say it hangs like a pearl on the end of India's necklace. Because of that, it's been a long time coming that people realize it's a country in its own right. And documented history is 3,000 years old, but apparently there's prehistoric settlements there 125,000 years ago. So, but what I love is that Sri Lanka has had many names. Okay, one of them was Lanka, which is part of the Ramayana, where Ravana, the king of demons, it's his country. But to us, Ravana is a king who had 10 heads, a head for medicine, a head for, you know, art, a head for architecture. So, and in his time, Lanka was beautiful and wealthy. My next favorite name, I guess, is Thambapani, which came with Prince Vijaya. And when he landed in Sri Lanka, he was so glad after many months of being tossed on the seas. He fell on his hands and knees. And when he lifted up his hands, there was copper-colored sand. And so he called it Thambapani, meaning copper-colored. I love Serendip because that means the island of rubies. And rubies are my birthstone, as well as the rubies in Sri Lanka are spectacular. And we have star rubies. If you're lucky enough to get that, it's a dusky pink. And when you hold it under light, you can see the star shining in it. And yeah, and obviously there have been several other names till finally it went from Ceylon to Sri Lanka as late as the 1970s. So yeah. But in Sri Lanka, because there are many peoples and many influences from India, from the Arabs, from China, from, you know, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the British, storytellers have a very different role. There are, I would say, probably 3 categories of storytellers. So they're the court storytellers who live with the kings and queens, travel with them, and are quite well learned, so they can write as well as tell, and they would tell the stories of the royal families. There are the religious storytellers who tell the stories of whichever religion they come from, and they are also learned enough to write. And we don't have books, or in the long ago times, the ancient, there wasn't paper. We had palm leaves, the tolipop palm, and the thin leaves, they would write on that, and we'd make books out of leaves, which is very beautiful, but of course not many have survived. And then there's what we call the general everyday storyteller, the ones from the villages, the towns, and they're the storytellers that carry, I think, the law of the land as well as the culture of the peoples. What's interesting, Amy, is that the peoples from the ancient times were called yakshas and nagas, and yakshas are nature spirits, and nagas are serpent spirits, supernatural beings who shapeshift between cobra and human form. But their lands are supposed to be very beautiful, subterranean, like they've got 1,000-columned palaces, and every column is studded with rubies and sapphires and emeralds, and their lakes are filled with swans, and you walk on paths of lotus petals. And yakshas are usually benevolent, but they can be a little bit mischievous, which I think is great, because I think in England there are sort of creatures of nature like that, aren't there?
Oh, we've got lots of mischievous spirits. Yeah.
Any particular one you like?
Oh gosh. Well, all of the fae. I mean, most creatures, if you are well behaved, and if you're kind, if you are not necessary to the law of the land good, but if you have a moral code, and if you treat other people in a good way, I think most of our creatures are a reflection. If you treat them well, they'll treat you well back, but they'll have a bit of fun. But if you don't treat them well, or if you don't treat other people well, then that mischievousness becomes maliciousness.
Yes.
And tips over the edge, and that is to do with how you are as to what reflection you get back.
Yeah, I think it's similar there, and maybe the world over, because what I mentioned before was about going for that year-long trip where I sold everything I owned and bought a round the world ticket. But I'm digressing from Sri Lanka. Most people obviously know we have tea there. We grow very good tea. And you might like to know that tea bags are quite a new invention for Sri Lanka. They're probably only about 20 or 30 years old. And what they did with the tea bags was they would put the best tea into the tea bags. So you could pay, say, £1 or £2 per tea bag, because you would get the best quality tea. And when I got back here, it was very different again, thinking about the, because it was usually blended tea within each bag. Yeah. And
well, I think tea bags can go. We've got rid of tea bags in our house. It's just because they have plastic in them. I think we should just, the tea bag was a bit of a diversion. Let's go back to brewing proper tea.
Yeah.
We don't need a bag.
And I'd like to mention, I think, Adam Speak, because Sri Lanka has got very beautiful, very naturally beautiful spaces. And one of the best known is called Adam Peak. Well, it's a mountain, and it has 4 names, really. 3.5. Sri Pada by the Buddhists, Adam's Peak by the Christians, and Samanalakanda by the Hindus. And Samanala, it means butterfly, because in Sri Lanka we have these beautiful white, creamy, pale yellow butterflies. And at a particular time of year, they swarm, and the whole of them migrate to Adam's Peak. And when they reach there, that's the end of their pilgrimage, and they fall from the skies. So you walk on paths of butterfly wings. And what is really unusual is it coincides with the pilgrim season of people walking up the mountain to see, because at the top there is the footprint, and this footprint, because I've done this climb, is about 1.5 meters, and now it's filled with gold. But what happens is you walk the foothills at night, and then at the base of the peak there is a sacred stream, and people tend to wash, wear new clothes, share food, and you climb the peak at night. And when you get to the top, you ring the bell, you bow before the foot, and then you go to watch the sunrise, because there is a very strange phenomenon that happens there. At certain times of the year, when the sun rises, you see an exact duplicate of the peak on the clouds, you know, and it's called a shadow, but I don't think it's a shadow. I think it's almost like another peak, but not quite in our world.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite amazing really to do it. I'm glad I did it once in my lifetime. I don't know if I'd do it again, because if you're a serious pilgrim, most people walk up barefoot, and I did have my trainers on. So yeah.
But what sounds great about that as well is that it's this place of pilgrimage for several different religions, and everybody's walking up there together, and it also sounds a really communal and beautiful experience where everybody is mingling, and there's no judgment within that. That's all, everybody's very accepting in that place as well.
It is actually, because one thing I forgot to tell you is that we met a family, you know, 3 generations again, and they shared food and everything with us. And I went with an English friend, and they gave us this little ball of string, and no matter who you are, there's a pinnacle of rock at the base of this sort of precipitous climb, and some are steps and some aren't. And you tie your piece of string there, and then you unravel it as you climb, and all the time the string unravels, you can make wishes for your future, which is beautiful, because, you know, and then when it finishes, you just let it go in the wind to fly. So yeah.
Oh, that's a lovely tradition. Did you do that?
Yes. They gave us even the ball of string, because I didn't know that tradition when I got there. All I knew was I wanted to climb it because it's one of the highest peaks there. And Ravana, Adam's Peak, and then there are 3 other peaks, and apparently his palace floated in the clouds. So I just wanted to be up there and actually experience what he would have seen. Yeah.
But how many of those wishes have come back to you now?
I can't tell you, Amy, but several.
No, all right, because normally you're allowed to maybe say once they've come true. I thought you were allowed to say, or at least
no, I think you have to wait till the end of the string as such.
Oh, okay, till all of them have come true.
Yeah. I never check though, so rather than be kind of.
I don't want to ruin any of your wishes. Definitely not.
I think one of them would have was kind of to know where I was going. And I think I found the path I'm supposed to be on. So yeah, that was quite not hard actually, it was quite a varied way of going to be where you should be. But I loved it, because everything I've done has made me the storyteller I am. Yeah.
A story that I kind of have always known, but then I keep coming back to, and it keeps getting more and more resonant. I suppose these go on. There's various versions of the Peddler of Swaffham, you know, and that story kind of having a dream that you have to go somewhere else to get this information, and then when you get there, you hear somebody else's dream that describes your own house, and you have to go away to somewhere exotic or remote, somewhere you've never been, somewhere you're scared of going, to then come home and find what you're looking for in your own backyard. And it just that that whole thing of having to go away so that you come home and you see it in a different way and actually find what you've got at home as well, I think is yeah, it just that's one of those circles I keep going round and round and round on, and that story does keep getting more resonant for me, definitely.
Yeah, well, I went away when it was a difficult time in my life, so I kind of wanted my life sorting, I guess, and I ended up in a country where I was volunteering all the way through. I told stories or learnt them, and I went to a hospital and I said, can I tell stories? And they were really happy, and they said that I could tell stories to children in the cancer wards. And so I went the first day, and when it finished, I found it really hard, you know, because everyone there was positive, but never talking about the future as such. They were positive about the day. And I went home and I wasn't sure whether I would go back, but then realized I had to. And so I kept going back, and I told stories there for a month. But in that month, something happened that made me realize that, well, I'll tell you what it was, the story. When I went in one day, there was a small child there, under 5, and they said to me, Debbie, he's the only child here today. He's been diagnosed with leukemia. The moment he was diagnosed, he stopped speaking. So I went in and had a little bit of a panic because I only knew one story for under 5s, and that was one Mary Medlicott, a lovely friend and storyteller, had written. So I just thought, okay, think of other things you can do, and looked at the computer and said, shall we go on the computer? And he looked at me. So I said, shall we look at a book? He looked at me. I bought some colored pencils and I said, shall we draw a picture? He looked at me. And then I spotted a teddy bear out to the corner of my eye. So I put the teddy bear on the chair next to him. And I started to tell the yellow blob that Mary had written. And it's about a blob that lives in a whole yellow world. Halfway through, he was taken out. And I thought, fine. And then I spent another couple of hours or so there telling stories to other kids who came in, parents, you know. And as I was leaving, I heard the nurse go, Debbie, Debbie. And when I turned around, he was pulling her by her uniform. So she said, wait, wait. And when they came up to me, he just looked at me and said, finish the story. And all I could think of was the yellow blob. And I remember his dad picking him up and dancing him down the corridor, and his mum just weeping with the nurse having her arms around her. And what I realized was that I tell stories, and whoever listens, we don't know how it will affect them. But right there, I was shown that stories are so powerful, you know, that when we tell them, it's an honor to tell, because we're giving something to the listener. It could be that moment, it could be the next year or 5 years down the line, you know. But I am glad to say, Amy, that he recovered, and he became a journalist, and apparently he doesn't stop talking now.
But also that thing about listening to your instincts as well, of kind of, I know that feeling so well when you're kind of your conscious brain's going, no, that's the wrong story, why would I tell that? And there's just your tongue is going, no, this is the one, and your brain's going, I'm not going to let you think of any other story because you need to tell this, even when you're questioning it. Even saying, no, this is, why would I tell this story? You just have to go with it because you don't know. You're absolutely right, you don't know, but there is something that will tell you if you let it happen. Yeah, and story. Yeah, David is just saying stories are powerful and amazing. Then they really are. So, what was that back in Sri Lanka, or was that kind of on your world tour in Australia? In Australia,
yeah.
Because
that year, Amy, was quite enlightening. You know, I also discovered that I love being challenged with a story. I love somebody telling me just a tiny little bit, and then I think, I've got to find out about this. And when I was in Malaysia, they said I was talking in, one of the street cafes where you just have noodles and stuff like that. And then somebody said to me, "Oh, you're a storyteller. Well, there's an Indonesian storyteller. He speaks English and he'll be able to help you." And I went, "Great, I'm going to Indonesia." Well, I didn't realize how many hundreds of islands there were, but I started in Java. I traveled across Java, and then I went island after island like that until I came to Komodo. And when I was 5, my parents gave me 2 Komodo dragons as my birthday present. So I stopped there to see, what they were like out in the wild. And it was bizarre because we get taken and put in a cage, and the Komodo dragons walk around the outside looking at us.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And then I carried on to the island of Flores, which I'd heard about because it has a volcano there with 3 different colored lakes. And the lakes have changed color over the years. And I salute that government because they will not allow anyone to go and test why the waters change colors. Because when I was there, there was a black lake, a green lake, and a sort of turquoise blue lake. And the traditional stories there are that in the blue lake, the souls of young children and the pure go to. If in the green lake, it's older people who've lived a good life. And in the black lake are ones who have not lived a good life. So, I went to climb that volcano, and there's one little place you can stay at where they're going to pick you up at 3 a.m. And I was staying there, and they heard the words again, like I was talking to someone saying I was a storyteller looking for story. And they went, "We have a storyteller." And he comes to this place every so many days. So would you believe it? Out of all those islands, all those places, I met him the next day, and he took me to visit his family, and he told me stories, and it was just incredible, really, that I could, find him for a start, and then listen and learn as well.
And that, I mean, I think you're very like me in that the land is just really important for you in story, I think. And it's one of the big characters, and certainly for me, kind of the storytelling is a way of having a conversation with the land. I mean, you have it with the people that are there as well, but when you go to a new place, for me, the way to find out about that place and to learn it and to make a connection with it is through its stories. I mean, so I haven't got stories from all over the world. I haven't traveled as much as you, but I mean, I think that's as important whether you're going like 10 miles down the road or the opposite ends of the earth. But you have done lots of traveling, and you've kind of taken all of those. I imagine that lots of stories that you were hearing, actually, kind of, it took you a long time to go to those places, because you said you came to Britain when you were 10. So you'd grown up with a grandfather. He was a storyteller. I don't know, how old were you when he died?
I was about 15. And he came to England 6 months before he died, which was really interesting because he saw this land that we'd ended up in, but he was still telling me stories of Sri Lanka and they came in the summer, but they were still wearing overcoats and things because it was just so cold. But and then my dad died when I was in my late 20s. So really, for me, this is the way they live on, all the law that they passed and the stories. And I wish, it's weird, isn't it? Knowing now what I know, it would be great to have known the other storytellers, but I'm sure my grandpa told me stories that my great grandma, the storyteller, that would have told him. And my dad told me stories that my grandpa did. And there's one unfinished story in my life, Amy. It's about an emperor who had barns full of grain, and one ant goes in to get a grain of wheat and come out, and then the next one. And Grandpa started that. My dad carried on, and we got into thousands of ants, and we'd fall asleep before. Uh, and now my brother carried it on with my nephews. Yeah, so they're going to hopefully carry that on as well. And would you believe I met somebody who said, I know the ending. And I went, don't tell me. Just don't tell me. I like the fact that I've got one story that is still, what could it possibly end like?
Well, it's one of the first stories, well, a version of it is one of the first stories that Duncan told me.
Oh, really?
I mean, with his, I don't know if this is the same in your story, but his story was that there was a king, and the king absolutely loved stories, but he hated the fact that they came to an end. And he wanted a story that would go on forever. So he put out a great reward for anybody who could come and tell him a story that would go on forever. And so this farmer came before him and he said, I have a farm. It's not a big farm. It's not a particularly little farm. It's just a good sized farm for me and my family. And in that farm, I have a barn. And I harvested this year's crops, and I threshed all of the wheat, and I took all of the corn, and I filled my barn full of the grains of wheat. But there was a little hole in the corner, and the mouse came in and took a piece of wheat and took it home to her family. And then she came in and she took another piece of wheat, and so there is kind of an end to that never-ending story, but I won't tell you.
No, please don't. Please don't put it in the chat either. So it is really, because my nephews, when they were younger, came and said to me one day, Auntie Debbie, do you know this story? And I was going, oh yeah, my grandpa told me that. And did your dad tell you? I was going, yeah, my dad took it on. And they're going, well, our daddy tells us, do you know the ending? And I went, oh no. And then they walked away in disgust. We'd like that end. Yeah, Mike, don't tell us.
Yeah, Mike knows the same story. But yeah, so you came over when you so you lived in this land that was full of really, because your dad, well, he was a snake expert, but an expert in all sorts of animals, and you lived in a land of Komodo dragons. You had pet Komodo dragons. There was elephants and butterflies and all of these vibrant stories. Everybody's telling stories, and you came to London, which must have been rather a culture shock. And I'm guessing that you carried on hearing those stories. But so what was it like, kind of being separated from that land and still hearing its stories? And then when you started telling them, to be telling them outside of that place of how do you have to change them to be able to tell them again?
Okay. So when I came here, it was quite obvious that the stories that were told were very different. And I went to a school that was quite sort of multicultural in its own way. I had friends from lots of different parts of the world. And what I think was shared most easily were personal stories about families and, what would happen. And what I think helped me become part of this land is that people were curious about Sri Lanka because they didn't know very much. So I think over the years, I started to tell bits about Sri Lanka. And when you know which bits are the ones that people really cherish, because it's all the little bits of information that you wouldn't find by looking in a book or nowadays looking on the internet. It's that, I think, that makes it special. So I like to tell people about what it was like to walk on the sands there and it be so golden and hot, but I would look for my footprints and watch them grow over the years. It was knowing that the coconut palms there, because the winds on the coast, they grow up and then they bend over. So, they're like bowing to the sea, but it's just the way the wind blows on each side of the island. And it's also about knowing the rhythm of the land. So there was a good time to swim on the west coast and a good time to swim on the east coast. And I guess so when I came here and finally did realize there was the sea, even though it was a bit further away, there were good times and bad times to swim, especially like winter. Oh, that was the biggest shock, seasons.
Yes.
Because we just had hot and wet, hot and dry. So it wasn't like that. And I guess when I first went to secondary school, because I came here and that was the first school I went to, I wanted to belong, be part of everyone. So I didn't mention about my dad at all, about coming here and having snakes and fish and, you know, other reptiles and stuff like that. And we lived in the Borough Market at that time. And in one of the warehouses, the ground floor was full of fish tanks and reptile tanks. And then we lived on the floors above. And we would climb out of the kitchen window and play on the rooftops, because that was our garden, you know, or we'd play in the market when it closed, which it did at 2 o'clock in those days. So I grew up with the smell of oranges and fresh fruit and lots of people around that had different stories, but in a way the same, because it was like a market in Sri Lanka. You go there, there's loads of produce, people talking, shouting, and there are stories that come from each thing. And then I remember one day a friend of mine came and knocked on the door, and before I could stop my dad, he'd opened it and they came in and they saw all these things. And I tried not to go to school the next day by pretending I had a tummy ache. But my parents said, oh no, off you go. And when I went there, everyone came running and I thought, oh, and they said, is it true you have snakes? And is it true you've got turtles? And is it true? So I found that it was so nice to be different and yet accepted. And
Well, if you'd have been my friend at school, I'd have been desperate to go around to your house. Oh, you must have been so cool when they found that out. And I mean, your dad was, I mean, he was world famous, wasn't he? I mean, he was absolutely the top of his field.
Yeah, I wouldn't say absolute top, I don't know, but he was pretty good at what he did.
And I love, you know, he's a snake expert. And one of the things that you said is kind of with the Sri Lankan folklore is the Naga stories and these stories of serpents and snakes. I'm assuming that that's something that really interested him.
Yeah, he loved snakes. I mean, my grandpa decided to build his own house out in the dry zone. And there was a large rock, and my dad and his next brother and sister would go there and lie on the rock while grandpa tried to build this house. And one day my dad woke up and he saw these sort of grass snakes kind of dancing on fences, and he fell in love with them there and then, you know. And as they were growing up in Colombo, he would have pythons, and every Sunday after mass, all the friends and the boys and girls from the neighborhood would come and watch my dad feeding the snakes, and they would make bets of sweets when they were younger to see how far the food would travel down the snake, you know. And and yeah, I guess my dad just taught me, I'm trying to figure out, he taught us about cobras and things, but I find Nagas very fascinating. And I think cobras have a kind of elegance to their movements. Yeah. And also, they do not attack unless they are threatened. So a cobra would rather go away than actually hurt you. So yeah, I guess I feel they quite often have bad press, don't they, Amy?
Well, they do, but there is that thing. They have the potential, don't they, of kind of it's not being able to see them, and the fact that they can take your life so quickly.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've only heard a few of the Naga stories, and they just really fascinate me. And I suppose it's kind of, I mean, in England, that quite often there are random bits in story when you hear them, and And maybe kind of sometimes you think, oh, do I need to leave that in or not? And I tend to, because I don't know why that it's there. And then whenever I've kind of looked into them, and you're a geologist, I mean, things like, particularly here, that we have quite a lot of rock moving stories, you know, kind of how that hill got to be there, or why that bit of, you know, that lump of stone, it's the devil's chair, and he carried it over from Ireland to Shropshire. And then you look into it, and then you go, actually, that there isn't that much of that kind of stone here, but there is that sort of stone from Ireland. And actually, it's quite possible that a glacier brought it. And that's kind of the scientific explanation. It's like, well, yeah, so a giant did bring it and dump it here, you know, kind of. So I wonder if there's things in the stories about snakes and about Nagas that kind of, that then you discover actually are right, that you wouldn't know at face value. And then a kind of, when you look into the reality of the behavior and things, yes, absolutely, there's that moment.
With Nagas, I guess it's the idea that they're kind of like supernatural beings, but the other form is human. So I feel that they're kind of a world, a slightly different world that maybe not quite in step with us, but they have all the same feelings. And what's really interesting about, from my point of view, cobras, is I find them quite mesmerizing, especially with the hood up. And you know, when they move and the markings. And one of the things about the Naga personalities is that when they smile, they transfix you, you know, and you want to just be with them. Whereas if they're displeased with them, like one flick and you're turned to dust. So it's almost like then how the cobra venom can kill you. So I guess that probably is the stepping point for me, the cross point.
I guess the skins as well, and that being able to slip off and change your skin.
Yeah.
And kind of,
I was just thinking, actually, just about all creatures, Amy. And this, because one of the things that I am very passionate about is that we tell stories of the land and the animals and the environment. And I just wondered whether, I know this is not a Naga story, but there is a very beautiful story that I wanted to tell, because I discovered the other day when we spoke that you didn't know there were leopards in Sri Lanka.
No, I didn't, but I love leopards.
So would this be a good time to tell
It would be a
story?
marvelous time to, yes, tell us a story.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to have a glass of water. And I'm going to start the story in Sinhala, which is the first language of Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka has 3 languages: Sinhalese, first language; Tamil, second language; and English, third language. Okay. And I guess that's another thing to say, Amy, that one of the ways of telling stories here now from there and here is I like to do dual language bits so that it makes it a bit more seamless into which place you're in. Yeah. Okay. So ahaganna mama etkota kiennan katandre mage hieden kiennan hinta hondata ahaganna. Wiva the namalin hadinmena ektararataka me hiruyata nirandaren muhuduralin sipaganna amba peru sevenie saman pichama suwanda musuwu pohia sanda elie. And in that land of beauty, of waves and jasmine and mangoes, there was a dry zone. And in the dry zone, it was dry. And the plants and the animals waited for the rains, because when the rains came, it brought life, coolness, and difference. Well, after one such rainfall, sometimes you'd get little puddles. And in one of the little puddles, a star tortoise wallowed, tumbled, cleaned its shell. And when it came out, the shell shone. It was like, as he walked, seeing starshine in daylight. And of course, He walked. He wanted to go home to his family, to his wife, his children, and show them how good he looked. And as he walked, enjoying the sunshine, enjoying the smell of jasmine, he felt he wasn't getting very far. So he tried a bit harder. He still wasn't getting very far, and he stopped for a moment, and it was then that he smelt fur. He smelt blood. He smelt death. And he couldn't see very far, but into his eyesight and round came death in the form of a leopard with gleaming eyes, sharp white teeth, claws curled into the ground and on his shell. And as the tortoise looked at the leopard, a little dribble of saliva fell down into the dirt. And the tortoise looked at the leopard and went, "Hello, leopard. How are you today?" The leopard was a little bit taken aback. "Well, tortoise, you are very polite. Something I'm going to eat for lunch is not normally this polite." And the tortoise thought quickly, "Oh, leopard, you don't want to eat me? I've got a hard shell, not much flesh. Why don't you go down the road and I'm sure you'll find something far more delicious and far easier to eat." "You're not getting me like that. I believe in having what's right here rather than something I can't see down the road." So the tortoise thought quickly, and he tried for sympathy. He said, "Please, leopard, I'm a father, a husband. I want to see my children grow up." "Grow up? Your children have a future? If I don't get them, the humans will." And so the star tortoise looked at the leopard. "All right then, if it must be, can you give me 2 or 3 minutes? I need to do something." Well, the leopard wondered if he was trying to get out of it, but 2 or 3 minutes wasn't much. "All right," and he lifted his paw off. And as he watched, the tortoise moved forward and then began to tumble in the ground, throw himself against bushes and break twigs and leaves. And then finally, as he watched, the tortoise flung himself against a big rock, cracked his shell. And as he fell to the ground, the leopard saw there was a mark on the rock. And the tortoise stood up and went, "Thank you, leopard. I'm ready now." And the leopard looked at him, looked at the scuff marks on the ground, looked at the broken twigs and leaves, looked at the mark on the rock and the cracked shell. "What?" he said. "What did you just do?" "Well, if it's my time and my story ends here, I want people and animals, when they walk by this space, to look at everything, to look at that mark I've made on the rock and say, 'Ah, isn't this where there was a great battle? Ah, this is where the battle between the leopard and the star tortoise took place. I know, yes, and it was great because the star tortoise fought bravely and well and left his mark.'" The leopard looked at the tortoise. The tortoise looked at the leopard. "Go, tortoise, I will not end your story today." And the two animals turned and walked their own ways. And they say in Sri Lanka, there is that place, there is that mark. And that is there to remind us all that no matter how small we are, we can still make our mark on this world.
Ah, that's such a wonderful story. Thank you, Debbie. And that's what we do with stories. Absolutely, we leave.
May I explain about the star tortoise?
Yes,
the reason I tell
yes.
the story, Amy, is that star tortoises in 2019 were put on the critically endangered list. And that means they're near extinction. It's because their shells are very beautiful, and especially the babies, they're so lovely. And people barter them illegally. So I'm hoping in sharing this story, and it would be great if you all shared this story, because the more people that know about things, I think if we are informed, we can do something that causes change. And hopefully there will still be star tortoises for the next generation and the one after that.
Oh, I hope so. We want lots and lots of generations of star tortoises, not just 3. But lots and lots of generations of leopards too.
Yes.
Leopards of honor.
Exactly.
So we are pretty much at the end of our time, but if anybody does have any burning questions for Debbie, nobody's put anything in the Q&A yet, but if anybody's got any burning questions that they think, oh, I just really need to ask this is your chance to quickly get typing. Because I've got lots of questions. I could just keep making Debbie talk all night, but I won't.
And it would be lovely to have questions. Yes, Amy, I'll make a list.
I've got your phone number. I will make you talk to me on many more.
Yeah, exactly. To say the least.
Well, nobody has quickly got in there, and I think it's because I just think that's I don't think we can find a better place to pause it, because I think this is a conversation, like all of these conversations. They don't end, they just pause, and we'll keep going. But with the image of the star tortoises and making a mark on the world, and stories being able to change the world as well.
Yeah.
I can't think of any better reason really for telling stories. So thank you so much for sharing your love of the landscape, for giving us a window to look and to feel Sri Lanka and the smells and the heat of it. And those reasons that drive you on. And I hope all of the other wishes on that string come true. Thank you everybody for coming tonight and for sharing this evening with us. It will be up on YouTube in perpetuity. Hopefully I will be able to edit it. If you've been trying to watch or listen last month, I apologise that it hasn't been edited and sorted out. I've had a bit of a nightmare with YouTube, and every time I've edited it, it's just stopped playing altogether, so I have to reset it and start again, and it's an ongoing thing. But Harini is there. You can listen to him, you can watch him, you just have to skip through the first kind of 10 minutes of rubbish and blah.
Amy?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, would you mind if I say, we don't say goodbye in Sri Lanka, so can I end and then leave you to carry on with what your bits are? Is that okay? So it's just to say, everyone, we don't believe in saying goodbye because it's very final. So once again, we put our hands together and we say 2 words, gihing and nung. And gihing means to go and nung means to come. So the idea is we'll go away and come back and meet again another day. So thank you all for listening and being part of this. I hope you live well. Gihing and nung. I'll hand back to Amy now.
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Debbie, for tonight. It's just been a joy to spend this evening with you, and Yes, go away, but come back next month, because Taking the Tradition on is on
Exactly.
every first Tuesday of the month. I will have another very special storyteller and a tradition for you next month, which is still slightly in negotiation. My patrons always hear about it first. If you would like to help support these sessions, they're free to anybody who wants to listen at any time, either live or on YouTube afterwards. But if you'd like to support them, put a little bit of money towards them, then you can find me on patreon.com/Amy Douglas. I'd be delighted to welcome you there. And so I'll announce it there first, but I will let everybody know as well too exactly who we are going to have next month. But for now, I will let you go, because if I don't let you go, then you can't come back. So go well, go safely into whatever door you go out of, whether you're going out to look at the sun or the stars, into heat or rain. Enjoy the rest of your evening or your day, and I will see you again next month.